everybody, to Inside Boxing Weekly Show on the Grueling Truth Sports Network. The Inside Boxing Weekly Show is brought to you by MyBookie.ag, Replenishing Care and Technologies, and Power Plus Mouthguards. I'm your host for the Inside Boxing Weekly Show, Mike Goodpaster, and right now I want to welcome in my co-host. First up, Jeremiah Preisser.
Hey, Mike, how's it going? Excited to be on. Always happy to be on. Let's talk some boxing, fellas.
Mm-hmm. All right, and of course, our other esteemed co-host is Jeremiah Preisser's best friend in a whole wide world, John Einreinhofer. How you doing, John?
Great to be here. I'm ready to roll. We got to talk up fights, no matter how bad some of them might be.
All right, and we have a special guest tonight. He was a co-author with Dennis Taylor for Intimate Warfare, which recently got an award from the West Coast Boxing Hall of Fame. Help me welcome in John Raspanti. How you doing, John?
Hey, doing great, Mike. Hey, John. Hey, Jeremiah. Yeah, I'm ready to go. I'm warmed up. I got a little sweat going. Let's do this.
What are you actually doing over there?
Nothing. Just watch a football game. I just thought that sounded dramatic, so, I just said it.
It does.
Well, I mean,
I'm starting
if you knew Jeremiah saying stuff like that's kind of creepy.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And like I said, I'm starting to work up the sweat, too. So.
Oh, boy. All right. Started a trend here.
None of that's from this week's fight schedule, though, that's for sure.
No, that's true.
There's a fight schedule this weekend?
Yeah, that's kind of a chiller right there immediately when we start talking that, yeah.
Yeah, well, we're going to do this. We're going to talk about the state of the heavyweight division tonight.
Okay.
There are a couple of heavyweight fights that are somewhat mildly interesting. So we're going to start off with Dillian Whyte against Robert Helenius. I don't know why, but we are, because it was the only other fight I could find. Dillian Whyte, 21-1, probably best known for stunning Anthony Joshua in their fight and ended up getting knocked out. Also beat Derek Chisora, who pretty much everybody's beaten out. It's a decent heavyweight. What do you think about this fight, Jeremiah?
Well, I think if this was, you couldn't even do that. But what I think is it's a decent heavyweight scrap. The problem with Helenius is he used to be a good prospect, and then he hurt his arm, if I'm not mistaken. And since then, he's just looked like a fringe contender. I mean, and this is a good stay busy fight for Dillian Whyte, who is going to get he's going to get a crack at a major player in the division soon. I can already tell just by the amount of money that these British heavyweights are making. Somebody's going to give him a shot. And I've heard, I can't confirm that, of course, that Deontay Wilder was offered $7 million to fight him. Again, I don't know. So for me, this is a good fight. This is, something that's going to keep Whyte competitive. Helenius, again, he's not the same guy he used to be. I see Whyte overcoming him probably in the late rounds. But it's interesting. And, with the heavyweight division, you never know. Helenius can punch. He's not, he's not basic. But I'm looking forward to it. It's a good precursor to the main event.
Yeah, this may be a better fight than the main event. John Einreinhofer, what's your take on this fight?
I don't think Whyte's really that good. I agree with Jeremiah that, I think, the British promoters seem to be kind of steering him into a position to, maybe get a shot at somebody like Wilder where, I see no way in the world Wilder would be afraid of this guy. So I laugh personally when I read that kind of talk. If Wilder was offered that money and didn't take it, it'd be for some other reason than being anything near afraid of Whyte. I also agree with Jeremiah that, Helenius was actually good at one time. I mean, some is respected as Emmanuel Stewart was very high on him at one time, but of course he got knocked out by Duhaupas, which is, definitely not a badge of honor. I'm looking at MyBookie.ag, our sponsor. They've got Whyte as a minus 700, Helenius at a plus 500. As we all know, I always like to check the odds. I think you have to. That's the collective wisdom. You got to.
And John, I think I would take the plus 500 and Helenius in that.
I agree, Mike. That's why I mentioned that on this one. That when you think that Helenius had that loss to Duhaupas, and he isn't what he was, to only be a plus 500, I'm thinking the same thing. That maybe they look at it that Whyte is not that good, like I'm saying, and maybe Helenius has one more effort in him, and you could have a shot at an upset here. That's where maybe this could be a little bit interesting.
All right. Mr. Raspanti, what do you think about this fight?
Well, it's a good fight. Dillian Whyte, I saw that fight against Chisora, and it was a great fight, guys. I don't know if you saw it, but
yeah, it was a good fight.
Yeah, Chisora had he had Whyte hanging on. He was in deep trouble, and remember, he only won by a split decision. So that makes me wonder. I mean, one thing that Dillian Whyte is good at, he's a good talker, and he's a good promoter for himself. As far as his talent level, even though he's 21-1, you know, the jury obviously is out, but he is going to get a shot at one of the big boys, no doubt about it. He's got Eddie Hearn, and that is definitely going to happen. Helenius, I agree with you guys. I don't know what happened to him. He was talked up as a big guy a few years ago, and he's looked very mediocre recently. So I don't know what's going on. Maybe he just peaked, and that's all there is to it. But I think Dillian Whyte should win this fight. But his chin, to me, the way he was wobbling against Chisora, makes it an interesting fight. Where putting some money on it for Helenius to win is possible if he can clip him, surprise him. You never know. Maybe Dillian is underestimating Helenius. So I like the fight. I think it should be a pretty good fight, at least for a few rounds.
All right, and then we've got the main event. Was supposed to be Kubrat Pulev against Anthony Joshua. Instead, it's going to be Carlos Takam. Takam's a solid fighter, John Einreinhofer. Do you give him any chance here, though?
No. He's a minus 8,000 on my bookie AG, which he should be. And that tells you what this fight is. You know, Takam, he has been in with your legit world-class opposition and hasn't done particularly well against it. You know, he's got a decent chin, but he's just a plotter. He's only 6'1.5". He's fighting Joshua, who's 6'6". And you know, he really, at the world-class level, he really doesn't have any offense.
Hey, but John, he's beaten Francois Botha and Michael Grant.
The problem was it was in this century, not the last century.
Yeah, the problem was it was like 10 to 13 years past their prime.
Right.
Yeah.
So Takam is somebody that doesn't belong here, and he's 30, and the guy's 36 years old. You know, this is a mismatch. We could be getting, as fans, don't buy it. I mean, there's no reason you couldn't be getting Wilder and Joshua now. It's bad for the sport. There's no, especially in the U.S., let's face it, there's no marinating of Wilder. Unfortunately, as we all know, you know, we all follow the sport closely, obviously. Boxing in the U.S. is just not as popular as it was, and you're not going to be building Wilder up to any higher level. In other words, and that's not a knock on Wilder, that's just boxing in the U.S. So it's just about Joshua getting easy paydays before they put him in with Wilder and take a risk. So yeah, I don't feel like we need this kind of stuff. It's you know, capitalizing, like we said, the UK market's hot for live audience right now, and there's enough money there with these British fighters. So you're going to get stuff like this, and it's going to be hyped up, you know, in the UK as a title bout. But what is it really? You know, to me, the heavyweight title, the legitimate heavyweight title, linear heavyweight title is vacant right now. You know, Tyson Fury's basically retired, and just because Joshua beat a laid-off Klitschko, that doesn't give him the legit linear title. So
it probably gives him the best claim to it, though.
I don't think anybody has it yet, and that's what I mean. That
I didn't say they did. I said it gives him the best claim.
I don't think there is a claim right now. I just think that because it's just with vacant, Klitschko is too laid off for that to be a legitimate linear title bout, and until you know, Ortiz is out of the picture now, it's got to come down to Joshua and Wilder. So to me, any fans of Joshua, stop making fun of Wilder, even if you believe he's not that good, and let's just get that fight on and find out who the real linear champ's going to be.
All right, John Raspanti.
It's a stay busy fight for Joshua. It would have been a good fight if Pulev hadn't got injured. But Takam, I saw the fight against Joseph Parker. He's a durable guy. He's a strong guy, but he's very slow. His punches are slow. I expect, even though it'll be hard to tell because Joshua is this is his first fight after the Klitschko fight. He's not fighting someone that should beat him. So, but I expect him to look better against this guy, obviously, because he is better. But usually when a guy goes through a fight like he did, traditionally in boxing. He comes back better, more confident, sharper, because he went to hell and back and he won. So I think Takam's been stopped once in his whole career. I think Joshua's going to knock him out. I think it's just a showcase fight. And next year we'll get our Wilder Joshua showdown. Maybe Joshua might fight Joseph Parker first and then maybe fight Wilder later in the year or something. But that fight is coming. It's a big one. It's the one everybody wants, obviously, but I don't mind waiting until next year for it. I think that fight will have everybody talking, and in the UK, I mean, they get 90,000 tickets sold in about 5 minutes when they do these fights, even when it's not heavyweights. I mean, think Carl Froch and George Groves. They're such great fans. So, and it's going to be incredibly wild Saturday. You know, Katie Taylor fighting, the young lady going for her first title. Got my paisan Frank Willioni fighting. It's a really good card. So, and then the other guys we were talking about. So Takam, I mean, he will try his hardest. He will stand in there, but when Joshua hits him, I think he's going to be hits him right. He's going to be in big trouble. I don't even think it's going to go 5 rounds, to be honest.
All right, Jeremiah.
Well, I mean, yeah, it might not go 5 rounds. It's hard to say. I mean,
the over/under is like 4. So.
Yeah. See, I haven't seen Takam's latest efforts. The last fight I saw was the Joseph Parker fight. He looked okay in it. I mean, Takam at his best was a pretty good heavyweight. I mean, a lot of people thought he beat Mike Perez when he was 20-0. He performed admirably versus Povetkin through 10 rounds. He's a good fighter, but like John Einreinhofer said, he's a plotter. He just doesn't, if Joshua decides to box, decides to stick that, that big jab out there and keep him at distance, because Josh is obviously the more versatile fighter here, and I wouldn't be surprised to see him, try to box a bit, try and improve on his boxing IQ. But again, it's Takam is just a little too easy to hit. And again, like John said, he's a plotter. I just don't see him offering too much, but one area where I will give him credit is he can crack. I mean, unlike Pulev, who is not a one-punch kind of guy, Takam is a big puncher. I mean, I didn't see the fight in full, but his second-to-last fight against Marcin Rakowski, I believe he starched him pretty good. One-punch knockout, I think from a left hook. I'd have to go back and revisit that because it's been a while. So he can punch. I mean, there's always that threat there. And if there's a problem that I have with Anthony Joshua thus far, it's his head movement. I just don't see enough of it for my liking. Again, he's going to be taller than most of his opponents, so he's not going to need it a lot. But I just like to see more of that from him. But Joshua gets him out of there. That's the persistent knowledge amongst all of us, and that's the way I think it goes.
Also, okay, so we talked a little about Joshua and Wilder. Is there anybody here that thinks there is a legitimate heavyweight champion right now?
No,
I don't. I just consider it vacant at this point, and for me, it's Joshua 1 and Wilder 2 right now. That's what needs to happen to fill the lineal belt, because I consider Tyson Fury retired. I think it's a fair assessment of his status at this point.
Yeah, until he needs some more coke or something, he'll be back then.
I agree, but oddly enough, the ring still has him in the top spot. If last time I checked, they still had him as
I thought the
champion.
rings rule was 2 years, wasn't it?
It was, but I don't know what their thinking is. Again, I don't rub elbows with Douglas Fisher or any of the guys over there. I wonder if their thinking is that Fury still should maintain his status because his hearing has been pending. Do you know what I mean? So there is some feeling amongst the British fans that the I forget what you call it, the athletic commission or the boxing board of whatever it is, the people who dictate these things, licenses and whatnot. Some people feel as if they're taking their time. They're not giving him an answer immediately, and they're kind of laying him off. Therefore, that's what's kept him out of the ring. So I don't know. Again, I'd have to ask him. I don't know if they'd answer, but that's maybe my feeling.
All right, so we'll go this way. You got Wilder and Joshua. So I'll start with you, John Raspanti. I mean, who would you favor in that fight and why?
Oh, I favor Joshua. I think Joshua, and I was going to say to me, nobody is really the 100% heavyweight champion, obviously, but Joshua, to me, has more gravitas in his being because he starched Klitschko, and that hadn't been done in years. So to me, I think of him as the champion. I also think that against Wilder, he's too strong for Deontay Wilder. I think that that was a very good point that Jeremiah made about his head movement. That's true. He doesn't want to get hit by Deontay Wilder, but I think when he hits Deontay, that's it. I don't really think that Deontay with those skinny legs will be able to take it. I think Joshua's the best heavyweight, like I said, and so obviously I would favor him over Deontay Wilder. But I think it would be very good, and I kind of think it would be a slow fight to start because they have respect for each other. All the talk and all that stuff, that's garbage. I don't care what they say. They're big guys. They got respect. They know they both can fight. But the way Joshua has looked, and as I said earlier, I think he's probably better now after what he's been through. Wilder has not really been through anything like that, and I still wonder about his chin. Of course, I wonder about Joshua's chin, but I think that Joshua is the most talented fighter in the heavyweight division. When they meet, I think that Joshua would most likely knock out Wilder. But again, that's an anticipated fight. That's an exciting fight to look forward to, and man, that one's going to be fun to watch.
All right, John Raspanti, you did John Raspanti.
Right.
Well, I didn't do him, but you know what I mean. John Einreinhofer.
I actually, with that intro, I actually give Wilder a slight edge over Joshua. I think if we get the Wilder that comes in at about 220 pounds that we got in the first Deverne fight, I think then he can fight kind of like a poor man's version of a modern Larry Holmes, who's almost taller, and of course he's got the thunderous power in the right hand. Holmes had a very good right hand. But Wilder has that one-punch right hand. I think Joshua is very good, but he's kind of a mechanical plotter. I don't give him the points for the Klitschko fight that a lot of other people do. I think when you fight a 41-year-old guy who looked abysmal against Tyson Fury and has laid off for 17 months, and you go in a life-and-death struggle with him at a young age, that's not points for you. You fight a younger guy and he drops you and you go life and death or something like that. I think that is maybe something that hardens you for the future, but I don't consider Joshua Klitschko that for me. So I thought Wilder, since Deverne is a puncher, in the first fight I think Wilder showed a good chin in that fight. I'm not saying Joshua couldn't these are big heavyweights who both can punch. Either guy could get taken out, but I would slightly lean towards Wilder being able to move around some against Joshua to be plotting, and Joshua to take 1-2s from Wilder, and Wilder to be able to pull a victory out as probably an underdog in the fight. And I don't think he'll be that big of an underdog.
All right, Jeremiah.
Sorry, I had my mic muted listening to John elaborate. I'm with Raspanti here. I mean, in my opinion, Joshua he's the best heavyweight in the world. And again, I'm not as crazy about his win over Klitschko as a lot of other people are. I mean, a lot of people looked at it and they feel like maybe, Klitschko turned back the clock a little bit. And, maybe there was a little bit of that going on. But again, he was a 41-year-old. He was many years past his prime. But I do like the grit that Joshua showed. I mean, that's the sort of thing you like to see from somebody who wants to ascend to the throne. But I like Joshua in the sense that I think he's the more confident of the two. I think he's the more versatile of the two. My biggest concern in a fight like that is just Joshua's body. Wilder is more built for stamina, whereas I think, again, Joshua is the more versatile of the two. I think he's... it's hard for me to say who's the bigger puncher, really. I mean, when you're 250 pounds, obviously he can crack. The thing about Joshua, however, is, 19-0 with 19 knockouts. It looks really nice, but I've seen every single knockout he's ever had, and Joshua, he's got virtually no one-punch knockouts. So I don't think he's a massive banger. I do think he's a good banger. So, the power, maybe, Wilder has a slight edge. Speed, I think Wilder has a slight edge. But again, I think Joshua is the more versatile of the two. But my concern is his body. You guys like that who are real muscle bound, they have a tendency to tire out quickly, and that's kind of what we saw against Klitschko. I mean, Joshua looked like he was panting pretty heavily, from the fourth round on, and I think we forget. A lot of people are talking about how great that fight was, and it was a good fight, especially in terms of a heavyweight. But you look at the punch stats, and there really wasn't much going on. I mean, a lot of these guys were, nitpicking their way through rounds. I mean, again, you had the knockdowns and whatnot, but you look at the punch totals, and if I'm not mistaken, Fury threw more punches against Klitschko than Joshua did. There wasn't a ton of action. Joshua, again, he has a tendency to gas out. I mean, you look at his fight with Dillian White, he looked like he was huffing and puffing in the third, fourth round as well. But it's an interesting fight. And again, I would favor Joshua here. I think he's the more confident of the two. I think he's riding high. And I think he's more versatile.
Well, I can tell you this. I would favor Joshua. He's beaten, three guys Dillian White. He's beaten Brazil. He's beaten, Klitschko. That's better than any of Wilder's wins, I think. I'm not real impressed with Stavern. Or Chris Arreola or Eric Molina or Spilsga or whatever the hell his name is. But I can tell you this. I don't think either one of them are that good. I have concerns about Joshua's stamina. I have concerns about Wilder's ability to take a punch. And like John said, I think people miss it when they don't look at his legs. I mean, I've never seen a heavyweight with legs like that that could take a punch.
Larry
Holmes.
Also,
I think that'll lead to him getting tired.
Larry Holmes had the same legs as Wilder.
No way.
Larry Holmes
had bigger legs than that.
Skinny. No way.
No
way they were that skinny.
And I mean, the other thing is this. I think we all should not say Larry Holmes when we're talking about these two guys.
This is true.
Even a poor man's version.
Please.
Because Larry Holmes would beat the living hell out of both of these guys in about a round. And
Larry
I'm talking
Holmes,
about today. If you let him train for 4 months, he might.
Larry Holmes weighed about 208 when he had the war with Ken Norton. Look at his legs in that fight. He looks very.
Yeah, I do, and they're nothing like Wilder's. Wilder got little ankles and everything else.
They're like
4 inches shorter.
Like a previous era's version of Wilder, as people have generally gotten bigger.
I don't see it.
I don't see that.
I don't see it.
But
no.
I don't see too many guys being compared to Larry Holmes, and especially him. But, I mean, if you look at Larry Holmes that fought Muhammad Ali, I'm looking at a picture now. He had some big thighs.
Yeah,
he had some decent-sized calves, and I can't believe this sounds kind of gay that I'm talking about that. But that's what happens when you just pull into Morgantown. You bring that out in people, John.
I think you guys are clouding yourself with the older Holmes. You got to look at the young Holmes.
I am. I just looked at it. 1980 is not an old Holmes. Is it?
Yeah. Look at it.
No.
Look at him for the Norton fight when he's weighing in.
The Norton fight was 78. That was 2 years before.
Right.
I don't think there was much difference. He didn't have massive legs like, say, a Joshua, no, but he didn't have little spindly stick legs like Wilder does for a guy 6'7", plus Wilder's 4 inches taller. So, I mean, I don't see it.
Wilder's 220. Wilder was weighing at 220 to 230. Holmes was 6'3", 208
right.
for the Norton fight in 78.
I don't know what that's got to do with the size of his legs, though.
Yeah, his legs. I don't know.
He didn't.
I'm looking at a picture of Holmes and Norton right now, and I wish I could show it to you because his legs were as big as Norton's, and Norton was pretty well put together.
Yeah, he was.
Norton was a muscle man and known as a muscle man. I don't think you could compare Larry Holmes' physique then to Ken Norton's.
Well, if you look at their legs, there's not a huge difference. His are a little more defined, but Larry's thighs are just as big. And once again, I feel gay again.
Jeez, John. Jeez.
Yeah, let's keep this ball rolling. Let's go with Larry Holmes' thighs.
He's got the better
Larry
thighs.
Holmes had nice thighs, but they weren't really well defined with muscle.
That's right.
But
yeah,
boxers 212 for Norton. Huh?
I give up on that.
Okay, because if you look at the pictures, he's got a lot bigger legs than Wilder. And my concern with Wilder is this. I think you have to give Joshua credit for the Klitschko fight just from the fact that He got cracked by a guy who, when he hits you, usually knocks you out. You don't lose power even though you're 41 years old, I don't think. Ask Michael Moore with George Foreman. And he was able to get up, and even though he was tired, fight through it and win the fight. And to me, that is the biggest question on whether somebody's a champion or not. It's why I don't buy the Mike Tyson was great thing, because I never saw Mike Tyson get in trouble and come back and win. I've seen that from Joshua. I haven't seen it from Wilder yet. Maybe we'll see it from Wilder. But as of right now, we haven't seen that. And that's my biggest question, is his heart. Because right now, I don't think you can question Joshua's heart. I mean, Dillian White even buzzed him and had him hurt. He comes back and knocks him out.
Yes,
and, I mean, like I said, when you look at the competition, Dillian White's better than anybody, I think, that Joshua's beaten. I mean, and he didn't starch Berman Stavern.
He dropped him and gave him a beating, though.
But he didn't stop him. And the thing is this, if you're a big time...
Only guy he hasn't stopped in his career.
Yeah, that's the only guy he hadn't stopped because they protect him. They protect him all the time. I mean, to me, I think, Povetkin might be the best heavyweight in the world.
Well, Wilder was a favorite over Povetkin in Russia. So
well, you know what? He's an American fighting a Russian, and they want to get even money bet. I mean, I don't know what who the favorite is in that fight has to do with anything.
Because odds makers didn't agree. They did not think that Povetkin was better than Wilder going in, and they got
once again,
wait,
bookies, and we've had some on the show since the MyBookie AG thing, will tell you that they don't pick who they think is going to win. They pick who they think will make the fight even money, so they win.
Right, but that's the collective wisdom, which is smarter than any individual, unless the individual has inside information.
Okay, John Raspanti.
I was just going to say that as much as Joshua doesn't move his head, see, I've been bothered by Wilder. He keeps his guard down low, and he can be clipped. And, in his fight against Gerald Washington, yes, he did knock Gerald Washington out, but he was losing that fight. He looked sluggish, and he struggled. And against the pin, Artur Spilka, that fight was incredibly competitive. Now, the point Mike made about both of these guys not being someone that we're going to put up in the upper echelon as the heavyweights is probably the best point. They're good.
Well,
they're pretty good. I'll say they're pretty good. But for me, Joshua just seems to have something more. Not just the fact that his legs are bigger. Let's not go there. We already discussed thighs enough already. It's all good. It's just that I think there's something about Joshua that if he the same thing, kind of like what Mike was saying. If it gets really gritty with Wilder, I think he's going to come out of there and he's going to win. I just have a feeling, but I don't think it will. Actually, I think it'll be pretty close, and then someone's going to knock someone out. That's just a feeling I have. I certainly could be wrong, but I do believe though that Wilder is not going to get better at this point in his career, and Joshua can get better. He's younger. He's still learning. Wilder, I think he's peaked, just because he's 32 years old or whatever he is. But Joshua can improve.
He's been protected.
Yes, he's been protected. Eric Molina.
But to his credit, they did pair him up with Alexander Povetkin, and they did try to get him Luis Ortiz.
Right.
I mean, but that wasn't his fault. I mean,
right. They could have done it in this fight. His next fight.
Yeah.
Because I'm sorry, what he tested for, the Osterine, number one, doesn't even work. Most people will tell you that. And the other thing was a diuretic to lose weight, which was outlawed in 1983 because it causes people to die. So it wasn't he was Shannon Briggs on anabolic steroids.
Well, yeah, the thing about the meldonium or whatever that Povetkin was first popped with, they determined that his levels of meldonium in his system were low enough to meet WADA protocol. So they knew that a lot of Eastern Europeans were using this stuff. The tennis player got popped for it. I'm trying to remember.
Sharapova.
Yeah.
It's a heart drug. It's a heart drug. It's supposed to be for people with serious heart conditions. So we know what they're using it for.
Yeah, so I mean, Povetkin was found, at least initially, he was found with low enough levels to pass, what WADA had asked for. I do think John Raspanti's right in the regard that Wilder just doesn't look like he's progressing. I mean, as many fights as he's had, I don't want to say necessarily at the world stage, but these are big time fights. I mean, he's selling pretty well in Alabama, and a lot of the world is watching. An American heavyweight, a lot of us have our eyes on him. He just doesn't look like he's improved much. I mean, his technique still looks raw. He still, puts his feet in the air sometimes when he's punching. Again, he lets his hands down, though it seems like just about any heavyweight is prone to defensive flaws. I mean, there are very few guys that I see who are slick. I do think Povetkin is pretty well-rounded and doesn't get hit too much. But, Wilder he's not improving a lot. There was I'm trying to remember which fight it was. He did look sharp, and then the fight after, it's just back to the old stuff. And he has a good trainer, isn't his trainer? Who's it? Donald Curry?
He's got Breland, Mark
Breland.
Done well.
Mark Breland. Sorry, yes.
Co-trainer, yeah.
I agree with a couple of points.
Hey, Mark Breland had skinnier legs than Larry Holmes and Deontay Wilder.
There you go.
I agree with a few of the points on Wilder. I mean, I do think Joshua has fought better opposition, and then as John and Jeremiah were pointing out, I think that it was not Wilder's fault. The Povetkin fight fell out. The Ortiz fight fell out. Those were fights that would have helped his development. But I do agree then with the point that I thought in the first Stiverne fight, he was just where we wanted him to be. I saw some of those poor man's Larry Holmes type attributes in a guy that's a puncher and a guy that's as tall as him, 6'7". That he's a dangerous package weighing in at 220 pounds where he's got the movement and speed. But I agree with, John and Jeremiah's point that even if it wasn't his fault, he has lost out on now in the years since the Stiverne fight, and now he's going to fight Stiverne again, and Stiverne hasn't even been active. He's lost out on a chance to better himself against a better quality opposition. I think that's what leaves him a little bit vulnerable against Joshua, but I still think that Joshua's now dialing down his opposition with the calm, and Wilder's fighting Stiverne, who thinks a more dangerous offensive
fighter.
Yeah,
but I think Polet was a decent opponent.
He's legitimately top 10, but he's also 36 years old. In terms of winning the fight, look at the odds; they back that up. I didn't see what he was going to bring to the table either. He's better than Takam, but not much better.
Well, my point is, I think he's better than Stiverne too. But
and he probably is better than Stiverne, but neither of these fights is good. But I just think.
And Joshua just came off fighting Vladimir Klitschko. It's not like he just came off fighting Eric Molina and now he's going to fight Carlos Takam.
Yeah. Klitschko was 41 years old and hadn't fought for 17 years.
Yeah,
and he looked just horrid. Looked just horrid against Fury. Looked just absolutely like he had nothing. So, I mean, this was not Vladimir Klitschko of 5 years ago that Joshua beat, and I really think we got to keep that in mind. How many?
Yeah, but I don't think that's a Vladimir Klitschko. If he hits Deontay Wilder, I don't think Wilder gets up.
I mean, we don't really know that. I mean, Wilder.
I know we don't because Deontay Wilder let Anthony Joshua take that fight instead of taking it himself.
Well, I don't think there's any evidence that Wilder wouldn't have wanted to fight Klitschko.
Well, I thought that John Raspanti wouldn't he offer that fight like a year ago at Madison Square Garden?
I'm not sure about that, Mike. I don't recall that, but I actually agree
when Fury couldn't fight the rematch.
Yeah, that could be. Yeah.
I mean, there is a lot of speculation. I mean, there's a lot of speculation that goes on. It's hard to say sometimes what goes on behind closed doors, where most of the negotiating goes on. But we're looking at the heavyweight division.
I heard Joshua yelling to fight Klitschko. I didn't hear Wilder saying anything.
Yeah, 40.
And at the time, I mean, it's a guy that looks done, and he looked done when he fought Joshua. He just landed a shot.
I thought he was winning.
And it wasn't one of the greatest heavyweight title fights of all time, by the way.
I thought Klitschko was winning the fight when he got stopped against Joshua. So I thought he was.
I thought he was too.
Yeah, he was winning the fight.
Yeah.
And actually,
but see, I'm one person who thinks this. You could give Klitschko a month to train and then put him in this fight that, he's fighting against whoever the hell he's fighting against, Stavern, and I would take Klitschko over him. Because eventually he's going to catch him. That's why I don't think either one of these guys are that good. I still think a 41-year-old Vladimir Klitschko is a good win for one of them.
Yeah, well, and funny. Go ahead.
41, yes. I'm sorry, 41 years old, yes. But I do think that I did think he turned the clock back. I think he was highly motivated for that fight. I think that was the best he could look at this point because you guys know the old cliche, the really good fighters or athletes or whatever, they always got one good one left. And I think that was his last good one, Klitschko. And,
yeah, he made the right decision not fighting a rematch. It wasn't getting any better than that.
He would have got blown out, I think, in the
yeah, Joshua would have got better. He would have got worse.
Yeah, exactly. So I think he did. He looked a lot better than he did against Fury. Now, obviously, Fury was fighting the cutesy little fight that he fights that would make anybody pull their hair out if they got any, because that's the way Fury fights. That's the way Fury fights. Very cute. They get away from.
Yeah, they're going to make everybody look bad.
Exactly. So this was the kind of fight that he would look good in because Joshua, you don't have to look to find him. He's right there. So, but I thought he looked crisp. He looked pretty sharp. He was always in great shape. This is a guy. He's the opposite of Tyson Fury, who weighs like 400 pounds now. Klitschko was always in the gym, and he was primed. He felt like he could win, and he did everything he could. So you're right. He was 41. He had been inactive, but he found it, I think, that night, and he almost won, and he was winning. I agree with you guys. He was ahead on the scorecards when he got stopped, and that's where I give it to Joshua that he dug down and found his second win. I mean, and that was another good point. His stamina is questionable, kind of like Ernie Shavers. You guys remember Ernie Shavers used to gas out. Wasn't big, muscular like that, but he was the big, heavy puncher, so I think he'd tire himself out more than anything else. But that is a question, and as we're talking here, I'm thinking about if
he
Wilder
had good-sized legs, by the way.
That's right. If Wilder
beautiful size.
Into the if Wilder if he lasts later into the fight with Joshua and Joshua gets gassed, then it'd be a very damn.
But
good
see, the
fight,
problem is we don't know if Wilder gets gassed or not.
He looked pretty tired. I was there. I was at ringside for the Stavern fight. He was pretty gassed in that fight. Well, obviously, so was Stavern.
And that's against Stavern, not against somebody who's going to put pressure on him and hit him.
Right. The pressure is the point. That's the point with Wilder. If you can take his shot and put pressure on him, I don't think he lasts. That's just what I saw when I was watching up close and personal there in Vegas a few years ago. So, but yeah, it's going to be a compelling fight just because there's intangibles and there's flaws from both guys. So that it makes it very interesting.
Well,
all right. So let's go ahead. How about this? Well, go ahead.
Okay. So what I was going to say is, I'm listening to all of us talk, and I'm trying to put things into perspective, and I'm not sure some of us are convinced that I like Anthony Joshua. Let me preface by saying that. But I'm not sure that I'm convinced or that others are convinced that he's necessarily better than, or he's not much better than a guy like Frank Bruno. Okay, so what we've got is maybe Bruno 2.0 versus, Larry Holmes 0.5.
Either that, or what about Bruno against Michael Grant?
There you go. To
me, that's what this fight is. Or Michael Grant against himself. That's what these two guys remind me of. The only difference is Joshua showed the ability to get up off the canvas and win. So I think it's Frank Bruno, Michael Grant.
But look at this. So we've got Frank Bruno versus Michael Grant, and then we've got
both
41
nice size too.
40, especially Grant. That's why I watched it. It had nothing to do with his boxing ability. But no, so we've got Frank Bruno versus Michael Grant, 41-year-old Klitschko, and then a 400-pound Tyson Fury, and I'm looking at the top 10 of the division, and all these guys. Basically all the good ones, Luis Ortiz, he's probably 43. His age is probably a lie. Povetkin's, I don't know, 36, 37. Pulev is up there. The division, again, I'm preaching to the choir, I'm sure, but the division is not at a strong point.
No, the division. We'll start with John Raspanti. John, real quick, I want to ask you this, and
Okay.
this will probably be the final question for tonight, unless one of us gets on a tangent, which could always happen. Outside of Wilder and Joshua, who is the guy that you think over the next 3 to 4 years could be the guy that really steps up and becomes the heavyweight champion, or do you think Wilder or Joshua is that guy?
Well, that's a good question. A couple of years ago, I really thought the 43-year-old Luis Ortiz was a really, and I think he still is talented. If he's 43, 48, 38, whatever he is, he's got some talent, but he's constantly bending the rules, doing stupid things. So I thought he was the best pure fighter. I mean, he could jab, he can move, he's got that good Cuban pedigree. He's the full thing there as far as a fighter goes, I think. But he's probably done here as far as we go, being the top guy in a few years, obviously. So, and I used to think too that Joseph Parker was, a few years ago, I thought he had the ability, but like Wilder, he hasn't improved at all in his last few fights. If anything, he's looked worse than he did. Maybe it has something to do with his competition, but I think though that Joshua and Wilder are the two top guys. I do, and Joshua should be there. If he beats Wilder, he'll be the dominant guy for the next few years. I think. Who's the guy from New York that he didn't really impress me? Gerald Miller, Big Baby
Miller.
Yeah, I saw him, and I wasn't very impressed with him. I'd heard a lot about how good he was and everything. He looked pretty good, but he might be fighting one of the big guys.
He's fat, though. Let's face it, he's fat.
He is, extremely.
Looks like Tony Tubbs.
Yeah, Tony Tubbs.
2.0,
yeah. So I think it's
Jeremiah would say.
It's basically those guys. Parker's going to get his chance to show if he's got anything. I think Wilder or Joshua would beat him. So I think it's pretty much them that are going to be the top guys for the next 2, 3, 4 years.
All right, John Einreinhofer. Getting my John mixed up, excuse me.
Despite my criticisms of Joshua, I'm not down on Joshua. I think he's fought better opposition than Wilder. I just give Wilder a slight edge. I think they're the top two, but I do have two other names that I like. I don't think the division's developed like we'd hoped, and these two names are guys that I like that I think still could have the promise. And that would be, first I would say Yurat Gassiev. I think he's got a shot to win this cruiserweight tournament, and if he gets through Dorticos and Usyk to do it, he's young, he's got the frame, he's got the power. I think even moving up to heavyweight, I would think he'd be right there. Let's face it, odds makers know this kind of stuff. Gassiev's would be a favorite over Stavern right now. He'd be a favorite over Takam. That's why it frustrates me when people get caught up too much in these modern weight divisions that don't really matter, especially for the upper echelon. Gassiev would be favored over all these guys. He'd be favored over Joseph Parker right now. And then I do like Miller. I think he brings an interesting package. He's got a chin. He's got unusual stamina for his size.
He's fat,
he throws the punches. And he's kind of a guy, almost like a Foreman in the sense that he can bludgeon you down. It's almost not one punch, but he can just bludgeon you down. And I agree, he's come in too high in weight, but he's got that kickboxer stamina. I keep saying he's the X factor. I'm still going to say that. There are some things that could go wrong with him, but you notice in all these fights, like who Wilder's fighting, who Wilder's fighting, who Joshua's fighting, they always mention Big Baby as a possible opponent, but then nobody wants Big Baby because Big Baby...
Yeah, because you can't make no money fighting Big Baby, so you might as well fight somebody you know you're going to beat the hell out of.
Well, you don't want to fight somebody that you can't make as much money with that might knock you out, and that's why...
I don't think they're worried about that with Big Baby. The fact that he's never really beaten anybody outside of Gerald Washington makes him not really a threat.
I think they're plenty worried about Big Baby, and that's why HBO just signed him.
I don't think they are. He's fat. And my point is this. I've seen a lot of fat heavyweights that were talented, like a Tony Tubbs. But if he's fat, my question is his work ethic and how bad he really wants it.
Well, that's one thing, Mike, but Tony Tubbs doesn't throw the punches that Jarrell Miller does with the kind of authority that Jarrell Miller does, and that's why HBO picked up Miller, and it was a smart move when they picked up Miller.
Butterbean was fat, too. He couldn't beat Larry Holmes when he was 60.
No, he couldn't.
I question anybody that makes that kind of money, that has that kind of potential in future, that does not get themselves in the best shape possible. There's something wrong there. I haven't seen too many fat heavyweights that all of a sudden became not fat heavyweights and stayed that way. It was Riddick Bowe's downfall, because when you carry that extra weight, it shortens your career, number one.
Except for George Foreman, he carried the extra weight and he won the lineal title, carrying all that extra weight.
Yeah, but George Foreman wasn't fat. I mean, he was 6'4", 245 pounds when he won the title.
He was
big boned, but
he was weighted at 257. He weighted at like 257.
257 is not 300 pounds. And I don't think we should be comparing big fat baby Miller to George Foreman either.
But George Foreman was from an era 40 years ago originally. Miller's from an era.
Yeah, George Foreman was special though.
Sure he was, but there's no doubt about that. But Miller brings some interesting things. Despite the higher and higher weights, you can't criticize Miller's punch volume in the ring. He can't fake that. There's some kind of stamina that he's got there at that weight, and that's a dangerous package for somebody to be trying to hold off.
Yeah, but this is the thing, John. It's one thing to throw punches at somebody that's a punching bag. It's another thing to have stamina when punches are coming back at you.
But this guy is.
And I don't think he's fought anybody where we can see that yet.
Well, we'll see. He's going to fight Walk on HBO, and he'll take him out, and he'll just keep marching forward, and we'll see. You know, I'm not saying he's going to take Joshua or Wilder, but he's one of the guys that I would certainly say is the chance to be a factor. He's certainly more of a threat than, say, a Joseph Parker, who's looked awful in recent fights.
I'll give you that. And I'm not saying Miller's bad. I'm just saying I just question his commitment, which is what gives me pause for concern with him.
And I actually don't disagree with you on that part of it. But I just think that so far in the ring, he's been an interesting force.
Yeah. See, the thing is this. It's kind of like Andre Smith. The Bengals drafted him in the first round, and he was fat. And he got a lot of money, and he just got fatter. So what happens when he has a little success and starts making a lot of money? Is he just going to eat his way out of this? Because I've seen a lot of guys do that too. But I do agree he's talented. But everybody we're going to talk about is talented, but not too many of them are going to achieve the kind of level that we want them to achieve. Jeremiah?
Yeah. So I'm going here with I'm kind of in line with Einreinhofer's thinking. I think whoever wins the WBSS Cruiserweight tournament is probably the next best heavyweight. I'm not saying that they will be the best heavyweight. You know, for me, Joshua's progress is pending. I want to see where he goes from here. He could turn out to be a very good heavyweight. I'm not doubting that. But what I'm saying is if there's anybody who, you know, is a potential heir to that throne, I think it's the cruiserweight, the cruiserweight who wins the WBSS tournament. Besides that, there's really a lack of young guys coming up through the ranks who I look forward to seeing. I mean, there are a number of former Olympians who have made the jump recently, guys like Oscar Rivas who look good but nothing special. Alexander Teslenko looks pretty good. That's a guy, again, it's hard to say with these, the chin, but that's a guy that I'm fairly high on. But besides that, there's just not a lot going. I mean, in 3-4 years, the division's going to be sparse. And, from some of the youngsters we've already seen, like Huey Fury, for instance, which, the guy who was brought up early, I think he's a cute boxer and I think he's good, but he was just doing too much like Tyson Fury was. He wasn't throwing any power punches. It was just jab after jab and
Kitty Pat.
Yeah, I mean, he's just too defensive-minded, and, those kind of guys can have long-lasting careers, but generally they're not the type of guys who stand on the peak and look down at everybody. So for me, again, it's the cruiserweight, whoever wins the tournament. Usyk, Gassiev, I think they'll both make marks there.
Well, I like Gassiev, but the guy I like's only won 5 fights, so y'all make fun of me. But I really like Daniel Dubois.
Yeah.
Has anybody seen him yet?
I've seen him. He's good. Yeah, he's impressive.
I like him a lot. I think he's better than Joshua or Wilder, or can be.
2 years from now, he looks like a natural so far. Only 5 fights, but he's not robotic.
Yeah, the thing that impressed me the most about him, and I know he's he's probably fighting me next from the guy I've seen him on film fighting. But
did you get the call?
The thing I like about him is he seems relaxed. And even against guys that aren't that good, a young fighter usually looks a little tense and everything. So I like that guy. Have you seen him, Jeremiah?
Yeah, I have, and he's getting a good amount of hype in British circles. He's got some muscles to his frame, doesn't he?
He's got thick thighs too.
Yeah, he's not skinny. He doesn't have spindly legs. Right.
I'm surprised I didn't talk about his thighs in the beginning, but he looks good. I like what I see there. Hey,
John,
as am I.
Einreinhofer?
You know, I haven't seen him yet, but I think you make a good point that if you observe a guy that's relaxed, you look at somebody like a Tommy Morrison who had a lot of talent, but you could see in a lot of his fights he was having trouble.
Yeah, even these early fights, he looked like he was wound really tight.
Yeah, he was. Yeah,
until Ray Mercer unwound him.
Oh boy, did he!
Wise, and obviously getting nailed wise, and he had talent.
But you know what? If Tommy Morrison was in his prime today, he'd be the heavyweight champion.
But certainly I agree that era. I've been saying it in recent years. I didn't appreciate it at the time, living through it. But I think now you look back on it, the '90s heavyweight era, which included Morrison, is probably the next best heavyweight era after the '70s. I think now when we look back at it.
I agree with that.
Yeah, and people rip the heavyweight division today. And we've talked about this before, Jeremiah, but there's not too many periods or decades in the 20th century where the heavyweight division was loaded.
No, and that's that's just in my thinking is that heavyweights are generally less talented than other fighters. The division isn't as stacked as other divisions. I mean, when you go to BoxRec and you look at the amount of fighters that are participating in a division, I mean, it's you see 1,000 plus in middleweight, and I would say anywhere from about 126 to 175, you see about 1,000 plus guys participating. Heavyweights, it's just a bit thinner, and not only that. The sad thing is we have more international competition, right? We've got the British have invested a lot of dollars in their amateur system, and we've seen good come out of that. The Irish have done the same. We're starting to see a lot of Eastern Europeans make the jump. Unfortunately, they're making it too late, so we're not getting them as early as we would like. But I do know that a few others have made the cut too, like Filip Hrgovic. I believe he was an Olympian. The guy from Uzbekistan, I believe, has also made the jump to the professional division. But there's a lot of international competition now, but there isn't the hard-nosed attitude that a lot of the previous eras had. So you see guys like Tyson Fury giving it all up, for ice cream and cake.
Yeah, but you can't really blame the man. Ice cream is really good.
It is, yeah. Maybe. I mean,
especially in October, because at DQ they get that pumpkin pie blizzard. I love those things. That's the only reason I didn't become heavyweight champion.
Yeah, the allure of that is just too strong.
Because I got big thighs.
Look at Jarrell Miller. He can eat the pumpkin pie blizzard and still be effective.
See, and that's the problem. That's why I didn't become champion. I think it's going to bite him in the ass too. But I digress.
There was a guy that I saw when I was at Virgil Hunter's gym, the super heavyweight gold medalist 2016, Tony Yoka. You guys know anything about him? He's had 2 fights. His professional debut, he fought a guy who was 12-0 in France, and Virgil was telling me that's because he's the gold medalist, and in the UK and in France like that, you have to fight a guy with a good record. They won't allow you to fight somebody with a record of like 2-11 in your
but come on, he's fighting a guy from France at 12-0. It's like fighting a guy from Alabama that's 12-0.
Yeah, but still, that is pretty surprising if you think about it in your debut fight. Rarely do you ever see anybody fight somebody, even if it is very iffy and risky about his 12-0. He still had to do it, and he won his next fight. I was watching him work, and he's about 6'7", about 230. He's got thicker thighs, not the skinny legs like somebody was talking about. We
ought to start calling this the thicker thigh boxing hour.
And Virgil is really high on him, and I think Virgil knows a little bit about boxing talent. So he looked pretty good. Obviously, I watched him spar a few rounds. So he might be a player someday, but it's way, 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 way too early to say. But the kid was pretty impressive. So, that's the thing. You guys are right, though. Heavyweight division is very thin. been thin for a long time.
Yeah, and guys like him and Dubois, the way the heavyweight division is, Anthony Joshua was in title contention in 2 years.
Yeah, you know who was high on Dubois, Mike, is Anthony Joshua. He's
a really smart guy.
Really the next best great fighter. So for him to say that, I think says a lot.
Well, and I
it's just when I saw him fight, like I said, the competition wasn't very good, but he just looked apart.
Yeah.
The way he fought. See, Wilder and Joshua looked apart in the way they look, if that makes any sense.
Right, yeah, you're talking about the way. Yeah, you're talking about the way he carries himself. But I've seen both of Yoka's fights because he's promoted by Ringstar, Richard Schaefer's company. Yeah, and I've seen him. I saw his debut and he looked okay. I didn't want to make too much about it, but he looked like he had improved in his second fight. It's worth a watch if you're interested. He's got good size. He looks like he understands the basics.
I will be watching tonight now. I can tell you that.
Yeah, I'm going to watch.
Right. But it is.
Now,
I think
here's
as
the
an
question.
American,
I got to get to this question because it drives me nuts all the time. But I'm on Facebook, and somebody posts on there, Mike Tyson was one of the greatest fighters of all time because he was the youngest heavyweight champion of all time. And then I got in a long fight with the guy about he's not the youngest heavyweight champion of the world because he wasn't. He didn't win it to me until Michael Spinks got there. Do any of you guys think that Mike Tyson was the youngest heavyweight champion of the world?
I don't. I can say that. I think Floyd Patterson still holds that.
I knew you would agree with me, John.
Well, then you should know where I stand, too.
He sends this message back to me like, yeah, but back then there was only one heavyweight champion of the world, so that's why he was it. And I'm like, what a dumbass. He was obviously like 24 years old. But...
Well, in my opinion, there's still one heavyweight champion of the world. For me, Alphabet Soup organizations don't crown champions of the world. The whole prospect to me is absurd. What other sport operates this way? Mike, you and I have talked about this. John Einreinhofer, you and I have talked about this. Okay, if the Atlanta Falcons in last year's playoffs took on the Detroit Lions and beat them and then claimed themselves to be world champions, who would take that seriously? But in boxing, you could have a guy. Look at the matchups we're getting now. We're getting Artur Beterbiev versus Koling. We're getting now we're getting Shabransky versus Kovalev. That is now for the.
Now it's a title fight. Yep.
Yeah, now it's a title fight. We're getting Sergey Lipinets, who John and I like. He's fighting Kundo, who is rated like 25th in the world by BoxRec. But, of course, that IBF has him number 2 or something like that. For me, I just can't get behind the notion of Alphabet Soup organizations crowning world champions because a lot of times they're picking winners. They discriminate against the fighters of other Alphabet Soup organizations who are ranked. It just feels arbitrary. And not only that, a lot of times the people who are getting the shot, they're getting paid to be ranked. Luke Campbell's fight for Jorge Linares, he fought, who was it, Darlis Perez, maybe I'm mistaken. And Perez jumped from number 7 to number 1 overnight, no explanation, nobody lost, nobody won for there to be any divisional shakeup. But all of a sudden, it's obviously what that is Hearn positioning his guy to get a shot at Jorge Linares. And is it any coincidence that 3 Eddie Hearn lightweights have gotten a shot at Jorge Linares? No, it's not. Is it any coincidence that Bob Arum's fighters hold something like 9 of his fighters either hold the WBO title or the number 1 position for it in all weight classes? Is that a coincidence?
Well, and if you want to make the NFL comparison, it would have been like the Patriots beating the Falcons and being crowned the world champions, and then 2 days later, another organization decides to strip the Patriots because they're going to take 6 months off, and then they had the Falcons play the Steelers for their championship.
Right.
And by the time you're done, the Bears have a shot to be world champions.
Oh, wow. Don't tell me that.
The Bears could be NFL regular champions instead of NFL super champions.
Or they could be NFL silver champions
That's
because
right.
they beat the Steelers.
That's right. We'll take that.
But like
you
I
said, John Raspanti, you don't want to argue what made it Mike Tyson's the youngest heavyweight champion of all time?
I'm going to get there. I think Floyd Patterson, I like the history of boxing, and Floyd Patterson is the youngest heavyweight. I don't think Tyson was a great fighter. I think he was good, especially before he got with Don King, but he was not a great fighter. But I got to talk a little bit for a second about what you guys were talking about. I think the alphabet titles has hurt boxing tremendously. It's all about greed. It's all about money. We know that. But I've had more people around, let's see, Mike is older than me, right? No, I'm kidding. People around that age, our age area, Mike and I'm a lot older than Mike, forget that, who have said to me, I don't follow boxing anymore because I don't know who the champions are. I used to know 30 years ago who the champion was because they had one.
Well, 30 years ago you had the WBA and the WBC. Everything went to hell when Larry Holmes jumped to help the IBF.
Yeah, well, there you go. Two, we could handle two. One was always the best, though. That was to me, that was the way it was always supposed to be. But now you have
but two is doable because a lot of times those two would fight each other and unify it.
Yeah, but I agree with John, though. The real old-timers, nobody accepted the two. I think we get a little too nostalgic for the 80s era there. That I remember my dad and my grandpa, they wouldn't even look at WBA and WBC. They were absolutely offended by it.
Well, I didn't either, but like I said, at least back then WBA would fight WBC.
Occasionally. Not all.
Hearns Leonard, they unified. A lot of guys unified. Anymore, you can't unify because there's like 700 championships.
That's
up with it now. You got a regular champion,
that's why
you got an average champion, you got a mediocre champion. I can't keep
up
with it. So it's crazy.
Champion.
You got a size champion. I can't keep up with it.
Everybody's getting titles now, but that's exactly why you have 11-year span between Jermaine Taylor unifying all the trinkets and Terrence Crawford. And a lot of people are making a big deal about it. I can't personally because these organizations are actively working against the fighters' interests. They want to strip you so they can give the belt to somebody else and start milking it. Every once in a while, they'll come together for history and pat themselves on the back.
And then one of them will strip the guy a week later.
Exactly. Look at Terrence Crawford. He had to give up the IBF belt in what?
Let's face it. Anybody that thought Julius Ndongo had a chance in that fight was smoking crack.
Yeah.
Agreed.
John Einreinhofer, I know you and I were both, wondering about that one because a lot of people are like, Ndongo's got good size, whatever. I don't really care. But they've got to go back to the one division status. I know the hurdles. I know the hurdles surrounding it. We all acknowledge that, but they have to. The UFC has it right. When you have recognizable champions, when you have the man in each class, you can identify with him. You can identify with his story. And Raspanti, to your point, I was watching John. I'm forgetting his name now. The broadcaster for the color commentator for HBO. What's his name?
Oh, Lampley.
Kellerman.
Yes, Lampley. Sorry, I'm listening to John Lampley.
Jim Lampley.
Yes, I'm listening to him talk on his show. And I've talked about this before, but he's with a lady, I forget her name, and he asks her about boxing and whether or not she's a fan, and she says almost the same thing that you said about other fans. I don't know who these guys are. I don't know who the champion is. I mean, hardcore fans like all of us, we can't follow this thing. I mean,
that's right.
They strip Jorge, like the WBC, for instance, they strip Jorge Linares of his title for taking too long to defend it, even though not even a year had passed, if I'm not mistaken. So they say, okay, now you're a diamond belt champion, and then they let Zlaticanin fight for a vacant title, the full title. And then they've got the regular titles and the interims. It's ridiculous. And not only that, people, you look at some of the fans, and I'm going to blame the British here. A lot of them are hyping up the IBO title, and I can't stand it. To add another title to the mix is lunacy.
It is. I agree. Totally crazy.
I think the fans have. Just wanted to add. I agree with everybody, and the fans. Even though the fans have trouble getting united and things, the fans have got to try to take care of this. You've just got to recognize one true champion of division, and when fans buy into the alphabet stuff, and you see the Brits do a lot of this because they're the Brits are right up there with the Americans statistically with the true good fighters, but they should realize they don't need all these alphabet belts to do it. I think what's lost, and maybe John Raspanti, being a top writer, can comment on this. It seemed like, and Mike's my age, and Jeremiah follows all the history. All you got to do is look at his article on Pedrosa to know he definitely knows what's going on in all eras. What happened to in the U.S. when all the box writers and the magazines used to just ridicule the alphabets? I mean, it seemed like when you were a U.S. fan at one point, you were trained correctly to laugh at the alphabets.
Yeah, but now they're bought off probably.
Yeah, you've got younger fans now who talk like the alphabets are really the true governing bodies, legitimate governing bodies of the sport instead of the corrupt entities that they are, and that really does add to where you have problems where fans just don't seem to be even seeing through this stuff anymore.
Well, yeah, and what part of what it is when we're talking about bought off, and again, I don't want to attack people on a personal level because this isn't against them, but you look at a boxing site like Boxing Scene where just about everybody goes for their up-to-date news. They have an IBO. They have an IBO sponsorship on their website, and then you have Douglas Fisher, over at the Ring, and the Ring's got a lot of history. They still do good stuff, but you have people like him tweeting and Steve Kim, belts matter, right? They praise these guys for finally, there's a juncture where the belts finally push somebody to make a mandatory defense or finally get two good guys together, and then they have their way to belts matter. When you don't even have the people at the top of the sport, demonizing these corrupt organizations for what they really are, it's tough.
Yeah. I agree. It's extremely tough, and it has hurt boxing so much because it used to be the man was going to fight the number one man. When Leonard fought Hearns, okay, we had a few titles, but still the top guys.
The hell, a year before that, Leonard fought Duran twice.
Well, there you go. See,
and Benitez the year before that.
Yeah, and then if you go before that, when I was a kid in the '60s. There was just Muhammad Ali, and then I think the WBA came along in 1967 when he got stripped. So it's all, but the bottom line here, guys, it's greed. So if it's going to be eliminated, you got to eliminate greed, and as we all know, with money, greed and money go together. There's no way it's going to happen, and obviously boxing needs a commissioner to look over, and that's never going to happen. So I don't know how because they keep adding titles. Now they're talking about a super heavyweight division. So there's another
the WBC
division. Another title. It's like, God, they're killing the sport in my view. I mean, with all these titles, because it used to be revered. When the heavyweight champion was revered, he was the title. He was the man. He was the title holder. He was the one guy everybody else was looking up to. Now it's like
plus he was the most famous athlete in the world.
Right. This guy's got a title. This guy's got a title. This guy's got a title. Then, like I said, one guy's the regular champion. One guy's the mediocre champion. One guy's a champion because he's injured still, and he still maintains his championship. I mean, it's like they sit there and try to figure out new ways to create a title, and all it does is just hurt the sport and make fringe people just laugh at it and go, that's why I'm not following it anymore because it's ridiculous. And even me who love it, like you guys, I find it ridiculous too. And as far as writers, and Doug and Steve Kim, sometimes I wonder about their. I don't know where they're coming from. Sometimes.
Now, John, one thing you brought up there, we may have to get Christopher Shelton to verify this, but wasn't the WBA? Didn't the WBA come into effect in 1962 and actually 1921 because you had the National Boxing Association, which in 1962, I think, changed its name to the WBA.
That sounds right. And then they had the I was thinking about the tournament that they created in 1967 when Muhammad Ali got stripped.
Yeah, but I remember reading a book about Dempsey and Carpentier, and I think that was the first fight that the National Boxing Association organized.
Well, that's probably true.
It's right. The NBA, which preceded the WBA, is the oldest, and The ring title came 1 year later, 1921 and 1922, I believe.
Yeah.
So, you know,
right.
when people start building up the WBC, that always annoys me too, because the WBC was, you know, really the initiator of the problem. When they came around late, you know, in terms of the history of the sport, and you know, really started all this alphabet stuff, because you just had the NBA, and then the WB became the WBA, and you had the ring, and you know, it wasn't all this chaos, and then you had the WBC, you know, which the old timers originally hated, because they started really first making the claim that there was two champions out there. So and it was all downhill from there.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think the WBC was in 1963.
That sounds right. Yeah.
It was 63, 62, so somewhere around there, give or take a year.
Yeah, that sounds right.
But they got that cool green belt.
Yeah, the cool green belt.
Which, if you get thick thighs, really match well.
It does. It really complements the thighs.
Yeah,
it does. See, Jeremiah and I are thigh men. Not for men, but more for women. But it can translate sometimes in the show.
Mm-hmm.
The green doesn't
And
clap,
did you know that the WBC was also a non-profit institution?
Yeah.
And anybody that wants to build up the WBC should be sentenced to repeatedly watch the Don King Jose Suleiman press conference, where they tried to take the title away from Buster Douglas after the greatest upset in boxing history, and then explain to me why the WBC is supposed to be legitimate.
Well, but since it was 42-1 and a Vegas odd maker had it like that, and they knew everything, John, shouldn't it have been given back to Tyson?
Well, because Don King was so confident.
I'm just jerking your chain, John, by the way.
No, but the classic was, what it was Don King was so confident, as everybody else was, that Tyson was going to win, that he didn't get a rematch clause, and he knew the Duvas were going to come in with that money, which they did, to get Holyfield a shot, and Don King couldn't bear losing the real title. So that's where Mr. Suleiman stepped up, and they concocted the Tyson's still going to be the champion thing the next morning, until they got shouted down by the fans. Thank God.
I think they would have done that even if they didn't have a rematch clause, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, they still might have, sure, but that was really what made it urgent for them, was that they had to do it then. With the rematch clause, they could have just had him fight again, but Don King was in trouble at that point, because he didn't have the rematch clause. So
which is why I want Berman Stavern to beat Deontay Wilder, because then Don King's relevant for a little while again, and that'd be awesome for everybody.
Please.
A little nostalgia there.
That's a show killer right there, Mike. Thanks.
He may be the devil, because he'll never die.
God.
But, all right, guys, we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. Any final words, Jeremiah?
Any final words? Yeah, I was just going to input real quick that the WBC, they just keeping on. And there's been a recent infraction where Louis Neary beat Shinsuke Yamanaka for the WBC title, and it was also the Lineal Championship. Well, Neary tested positive, and the WBC, due to their jug program, they get to make the ultimate decision. VADA can catch you. You know, they can say, hey, there were steroids in his system, there was this, there was that, but ultimately WBC decides, what to do with that data, and Louis Neary is being he's being allowed to keep the WBC title regardless of the positive test, on the grounds that Jose Suleiman didn't think that Neary meant to take it. So
you mean Mauricio Suleiman? Jose died, didn't he?
Yeah, sorry.
Mauricio Suleiman.
Mauricio, right, the son.
Yeah, sorry.
I got his phone number too.
Yeah, that's all good.
Oh, nice guy. Mike talked to him. He's a super nice guy. I talked to him a few times. Yeah,
people
nice.
say good things, but that doesn't eliminate their Mexican bias, of course, which persists.
True. It's true.
All right, John Einreinhofer.
Oh, I'd like to end the boxing year on a optimistic note, but of course it's boxing, so you can't. I'll agree with everybody else. We had a great first 3 quarters of the year in boxing compared to recent years, but my current theme is the demise of PBC, which love them or hate them. I liked what they were trying to do, but you can see the demise now. It's taken the pressure off everybody else. You see business as usual coming back in the U.S., all the fights just on Showtime and HBO, and it's going to end up on pay-per-view, except the mismatches that Top Rank's putting on ESPN and the ones Golden Boy are putting on there, which usually are not competitive. So I don't like with the fights we see getting signed. I don't like the way the final quarter of the year is looking, and I fear as we go into 2018 that boxing is going to be back where it was about 3 years ago, which I don't consider very good at all. And I wish I could be more optimistic, but I'm definitely concerned as we close out the year.
All right, and finally, John Raspanti.
Well, I got a little more light than that. I'm actually looking forward to the card this Saturday just because I like watching the fights from the UK. This one's in Cardiff. The UK fans are great fans. They're so passionate, and I love that. It's like it used to be in boxing. You talk about Jack Dempsey. They have 90,000 people at the arena when he fought Carpentier. I mean, to me that's just incredible. I love that whole atmosphere. I love it when I watch fights in Belfast. I mean, so I'm going to enjoy that card. That's a good card, even if the fights maybe aren't as competitive as we'd like. I'm going to enjoy that. One more thing about the WBC, I actually liked it when Canelo Alvarez told them what they could do with their belt when he had to pay that ridiculous fee of $3 or $4 grand. Yeah, I liked it when Canelo said, you know what you can do with that belt. I wish the rest of them would do that because I personally, that to me, that's ridiculous that you make a guy pay for having your belt. I just find that so wrong, but it epitomizes what's wrong in boxing a lot of time is that those kind of things where you can't do that in other sports, but they do it and they keep doing it. So I love
Mike.
Canelo said.
Yeah.
So I wanted to add one other thing, and it spaced my mind for a second. But Rob Day, who's done a little writing for us, he's going to be contributing. He's going to be sitting ringside for that fight in Cardiff. He's going to be covering the fight. He's going to be covering the fight for Ring News 24 and us as well. So we should have a report from that.
That's good.
Neat. Very cool, and hopefully we'll find out. Hopefully, John Einreinhofer didn't ruin it for Christopher Benedict getting into the PBC fight this weekend. I'll just post the show after I find out if we got in or not, John. My final statement is this. I'm just hoping that this week, during these fights that I want to see, that there'll be no live rappers leading the fighters into the building. There's nothing worse than that.
No,
outside of Mexicans with mariachi music, and that does not make me a racist. I just don't like mariachi music.
Anything with an accordion.
I'm not a big fan of rap music unless it's Public Enemy, because you got to love Flavor Flav. All right, guys, we're going to go ahead and wrap this show up. If you're all still listening, we've been on here for 17 hours now. It's turned into a Jerry Lewis telethon. I want to remind everybody that you can follow us on Twitter at Grueling Truth. You can go to iTunes and download our app, The Grueling Truth. If anybody out here thinks Mike Tyson really was the youngest heavyweight champion of all time, go to at Grueling Truth, and you can tweet to us, and we'll have you on the show next week, and we can argue it, because that would be fun, talking to a moron. So make sure you do that. Check out our NFL Weekly Pick'em show. John Raspanti was on. And I want to remind everybody, John Raspanti's book, The Intimate Warfare, the Gotti Ward trilogy with him. He wrote it with Dennis Taylor. The pictures by Ed Mulholland. It's a great read. It's a great book. I highly recommend it. You can find it on Amazon. So for John Raspanti, Jeremiah Preisser, John Einreinhofer, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.